Hi, so I was dreaming about Shogi, and I believe it was inspired by a recent video I watched from Nakamura Taichi. So if you're not familiar with him, he's a A-League participant, which basically means he's one of the top 11 players in the world right now. And he has a YouTube channel with his friend Suzuki Hajime, who is a former participant of the infamous Shorekai Sandan League, which is basically where people decide whether they get to be professional players or not. Now, unfortunately, he wasn't able to become a professional, but since then he's gone on to be the amateur Meijin, so he's an extremely strong player. And they have a YouTube channel together, and recently they made two videos actually about problem number 10 in the recent 21st Tsume Shogi Championship. So this is a championship tournament competition that they have every year in Japan of mate problems, and it's infamous. Some of the top players, even professional players, compete in this. So I think this year they had multiple A-League players competing. Fuji Sota has participated in the past. He didn't participate in this one specifically. But this is some of like the top level competition. And the way that the scoring for the competition works is that there's 10 problems, and each problem is worth 10 points. And they even give partial credit. So this problem number 10, for example, is a mate in 39. And so if you got the first four moves correct, you get 1 point, right? And so on and so forth, further you go in the problem. And so this problem number 10 is, I think, historically difficult because of all of the participants in the competition. The total score on problem number 10 is a big fat 0 points. So no one was even able to get the first four moves correct. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of show this problem. They did a video on it first trying to solve it themselves, and this is, getting input from someone who already knew the solution and telling them, no, that move's correct, that move's wrong, and it took them half an hour to figure out the first four moves even. So this is the problem here, and it actually looks kind of simple. You don't have that many pieces in hand. There's not that many pieces on the board. But it's deceiving, obviously. It's extremely hard. So the way that I thought we would do this is I'm going to go through the actual solution first. Because let's be honest, there's no way I would be able to solve this on my own. And so really, I'm using the source material of Nakamura-san's video to try and kind of explain some of the key positions and key decisions that you need to make in order to solve this problem. So I'm not even going to be able to kind of go into every single variation. It would take way too long. But I did hear from him that Fuji Sota-san was actually able to solve this problem, and it took him about 40 minutes. It sounds kind of long, but when you see this line, hopefully you'll kind of understand how crazy it is that a human was able to actually solve this. Even an engine, actually. When I was actually going through this problem in Lee Shogi, the Lee Shogi engine doesn't see the solution. So yeah, I want to kind of go through the actual solution first, point out some of the key decision points, and kind of show you the theme of this problem. So the first move starts with promoted knight going to 6-2. And then the king has to run to 4-3. Now this is actually already on move 3 a very difficult decision. And this kind of goes to show why no one could even find the first four moves. So the two main candidate moves are promoted rook back to 7-3 or promoted rook back to 9-3. Now there are other moves, obviously, but these are the two that we're going to focus on. Again, I'm going to run through the moves first, and then we'll come back and kind of show how these, why only one of them is correct. So the correct move is dragon back to 9-3, which is slightly counterintuitive. Generally, you want your pieces to get closer to the king, kind of cut off more of their squares, and so the natural move is to go to 7-3, but the correct move is to go to 9-3. Again, we'll explain why later. King runs, silver takes, king takes, and here you have to drop the knight. Now the basic idea is if it runs kind of in the wrong way, you have a bishop sacrifice on 1-3 eventually, and then your dragon can come in. And this is kind of like the mating pattern that you're going for, but you kind of need to create that shape. There's a bit of work to do in order to achieve it. King runs. This is the second major decision point. The answer is to drop a knight, but where? So the two obvious knight drop spots that only work are here on 2-4 and here on 4-4. So again, the natural move actually is to drop on 4-4 because it's covering more squares. It's not blocking your bishop from going to 1-3. But it just turns out that in this case, the correct move is knight drop to 2-4. So again, we're going to go over the variations on why later. It's really hard. It's so complicated that if we run through the variations now, you're not quite going to understand why the variation happens. So the correct move sequence here, I mean, it's kind of complicated. You try and sack the knight. He doesn't take it. You try and sack the pro knight again. King takes it this time. And then we see this pattern of sacking the horse and then bringing the dragon in. King runs, check again, king takes the knight. And this time, you're going to kind of bring the king in line with your rook. So that's kind of the idea. And now this is the third major and final major decision point. The only way you're really going to check this king to mate it is to move the silver. But the silver has 5 spots it can go, and only one of them is correct. And it's not super obvious immediately which way is correct and why. So the correct move, and only move, is to go to 6-6. King runs, check with the dragon, king runs, rook back, silver drop. Now here's actually a very clever one. I mean, there's not a ton of variations here, but you might ask, well, why are you dropping a silver here? Obviously, if I take the silver, then I'm going to mate you. But the thing is, you actually can't drop a lance or a pawn or a knight here because A, you already have a pawn here, and it's at the edge of the board. So lance drops, knight drops, and pawn drops on the edge of the board here are illegal moves. So you kind of have to drop a piece that's useful for your opponent. He gets to take, and then this mate, I think most of us would be able to find at the end. So that's the whole line. Mate in 39. Crazy line. But it becomes crazier and crazier the more we explain it. Okay, so let's roll back to the beginning. Now you kind of have a feel for what the goal is, what the shape of the mate is, and we're going to see kind of how those 3 key decision points kind of contribute to it. So if we go back to the start, this first decision point is, do you bring the dragon to 9-3 or to 7-3? So let's check out the variation where dragon goes to 7-3. Now, if we take the same line as before, everything is about the same until you get to here. Before, the king ran to 3-2. So what's the difference, right? And the difference here is when the king runs to 1-4, now your rook can check, but your opponent can do these intermediary blocks, these pawn sacrifices that kind of make things a little difficult for you. So in this instance, if you take with the rook, the king can actually run to 1-5. You can check to 7-5, but then the king can keep running, and you don't have mate in this instance. This intermediary pawn drop only works when the dragon is on 7-3. And the reason why it only works, when the dragon is on 7-3 is that if the dragon is back here on 9-3, you can actually take the pawn, and when your king runs here, the dragon can come back, and this is a mate. So there's this intermediary pawn drop that forces your opponent to block each other's rooks and then run his king to safety. If we take with the dragon, there's actually another intermediary pawn drop here on 3-4 with the knight. And this also doesn't mate. So it's kind of crazy where in order to get this third move correct, you kind of have to read all the way through probably to move 13 to understand the difference even between dragon on 9-3 and dragon on 7-3. So that's kind of the first hurdle, and no one actually even passed that hurdle, right? No one, because to even find out what the difference is, you not only have to get to this position, but then you actually have to find that intermediary pawn drop. And then you need to find the variation where, well, what happens if the dragon takes? Well, actually, you have another intermediary pawn drop with a knight on 3-4. So really difficult to find this and understand the difference. So now let's move a little bit forward to this second decision point, which is, where the heck do we drop this knight? And you really only see the difference here when you try and run through this knight drop on 4-4, right? And we're going to run through this line where we basically do the same thing. Horse sack on 1-3, bring the dragon in, king runs, dragon check, takes the knight, pawn drop, pawn drop. So you kind of get a feeling here why we went through the actual solution first, so you can see the difference. So now you kind of get into the same spot. You're going to notice here the main difference between the actual solution and this variation is that you have a knight on 4-4. And this is going to come into play very soon. You're going to see why. In this case, you actually don't need to do. You can just run. And the problem is, when you come back and check, king runs, rook check, intermediary pawn drop on 4-5 again. So I think you might kind of sense what the theme of this problem is. It's these intermediary pawn drops. And the reason why this isn't no longer mate is that when you take with the rook, the king can run to 1-4. And that knight that you dropped on 4-4 is in the way. You can't check the king with this rook because he did this intermediary pawn block, and now your own piece is in the way. So again, you have to read all the way. This is about move 30 in the sequence to even figure out which side to drop your knight on move 9, right? So you have to kind of read 21 moves to figure out the difference. And now even then, even if you figure out, oh crap, this knight is in my way, then you need to figure out, well, actually back here, if I drop on 2-4, not only is it not on 4-4 in the way, but I can then sack it so that there's nothing on the board blocking the way, right? Which I mean, obviously I would never think of that. And even I think the pro commentary was saying, like, even to figure out, to get to the point where you see that knight drop on 4-4 doesn't work, it's not obvious that because the knight drop on 4-4 doesn't work, you should then drop it to 2-4. That's not completely obvious. Because even if it's on 2-4, if you can't get rid of it, it's also going to block you. And then the crazy part is you saw that in even the knight drop on 4-4 variation, this silver move to 6-6 that we said was the third decision point was part of that variation. So now let's kind of go and move towards that move and explain why there's only one move in this position, this silver to 6-6. And so you almost have to read the wrong variation with the knight drop on 4-4, and then in order to figure out that variation correctly, and then deduce that the knight on 4-4 is blocking your own mate, you actually first need to figure out the third decision point. So just for comparison, if we were to instead move our knight, or sorry, move the silver, let's say to 4-6, there's a good defensive resource here. And you might have guessed it given that the theme so far, and we've seen this type of move before. It's again an intermediary pawn drop. And again, the theme is the same. When you take with the rook, now I can run up and my silver is in my own way. I can't check with the rook anymore. And this actually works with every other silver move. So if I move to here, it didn't work. If I move here, same pawn drop on 5-7. If I move back, actually, Let's actually show this variation. Actually, I have this variation here. If we move back, it's the same pawn drop, but when the rook takes, instead of moving up to 1-6, we can move down to 1-8. And now, even if we bring our dragon in to 2-7, the king can run, and our rook is blocked by the silver again. So, the only correct move is silver to 6-6. And the reason why is because there's a pawn here. You can't drop a pawn to 6-7 or you're going to nifu. And any other piece you drop to try the same intermediary block idea is actually mate because you're giving your opponent a useful piece. So you can't run to 1-6 after that because they have a knight or a lance and they're going to mate you with that piece. So those are like the three big decision points that people really had to read through. And you can even see the third decision point almost comes before you figure out the second decision point. So there's a lot of complications and a lot of times where you really need to find really good defensive maneuvers in order to understand why your line doesn't work. So that was kind of like the huge difficulty of this line. Even you know, for more novice players or beginner players like myself, even reading this mate that they have to drop a silver is difficult. So yeah, like that was the explanation of problem number 10 from the Tsume Shogi Championships. It kind of just blows my mind that someone actually solved this. I mean, I know it's Fuji, but even the person who created this problem, I think you may have solved some Tsume problems that say something along the lines of, if you can solve this problem in 5 minutes, you're about Shodan level. The creator of this problem said something along the lines of, if you can solve this problem in half an hour, you're about 8 title holder level. And now there's actually one more mystery that Nakamura and Suzuki in their videos mentioned right away. Now, I'm not going to go into this because it's insanely complicated, but one of the things that they noticed about this problem immediately, even before they started trying to solve it, when they were just setting up the problem, and I'll end the video with this, and if you have any ideas of why this is the case, you can leave them in the comments. But it's actually this piece. It's a promoted knight. Now, in these extremely complicated Tsume Shogi problems that get put forward in these championships, every single thing has a reason. So there's actually a reason why this is a promoted knight instead of a promoted pawn or gold, even though on the board itself they all move in the same way. There's actually a reason why this is a promoted knight. I'm not going to go into why, it's super complicated, but leave your comments. Leave some comments to see if you kind of have an idea of what the difference is between this being a promoted knight and a promoted pawn. So thanks for watching this. I think it was a super interesting problem. Super interesting to see all the variations and how far you kind of need to read ahead to figure out even what lines don't work, why they don't work, and what that means, where you actually went wrong. It's super not obvious. So thank you.